Welcome to Battle of the Stacks. Nic Rosental. Thank you so much for coming. Today we're going to talk a little bit about server performance, what performance is. We'll look at 8 different server setups or stacks. We're going to do some tweaking of some of those, do a little bit of light learning, not really a deep dive into any of them. I don't want to bore you on a second conference day afternoon, so we'll keep it light and fun. After we look at all the different setups, we're going to actually have what we call the Battle of the Stacks, where we run the same load test against all the setups, and we have a single elimination bracket until we get to the last stack standing. All right, so what is a stack? It's a term that it's used in many contexts to mean different things, and it's somewhat flexible. For the purpose of this talk, we're going to say that it's exactly that, the components that make up your application. So what you use to run your software, your software of choice, your web server, operating system, etc. So during this session, we're mainly going to focus on the web server part of the stack and a little bit on different options to actually process the PHP as well. All right. So what do I mean by performance? We need to be able to serve requests fast, but also reliably, right? Because even if we have a very high-performance server, if it can only service 5 requests at a time and then crashes, it really doesn't do as much good. So we need to think of both those vectors, so fast and reliably. And that's our definition of performance. Usually when you're trying to get a little bit more performance out of a server, first instinct is to add RAM or some other, actual server improvement, which means also spending a little bit more money. So this can actually help on the reliability side to a certain extent, but it's definitely not the actual proper solution. There's steps that you should take first, starting with optimizing your code, which is not something we're going to cover today, but it's important to keep in mind. And what we will cover is picking the right server components and configuration and tweaking what you already have. All right, what's the setup for all these different configurations we're going to look at? All the screenshots, tests, and everything else you're going to see was done on a 1 gigabyte of RAM server hosted on DigitalOcean, running Ubuntu 14.04 LTS. That costs you about $10 a month. So I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised of what you can achieve with just a $10 server. Right? And so we're going to start with the first setup, which is the LAMP stack. I recognize it's probably the most popular, so just a show of hands, who has to manage or has managed the LAMP stack before? All right, pretty much everybody. So you'll know it stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And the setup can go a long way if used properly, but what makes it so popular is also what makes it inadequate, which is it's really easy to set up. But right out of the box is not really configured for performance. If you ever use Ubuntu, you probably have run this command to do the one-liner to get a LAMP stack up and running. You do task cell, you choose LAMP server, and you're done. What you get on the 14.04 version of Ubuntu is actually Apache 2.fork in pre-fork mode. Now we're going to look at the different modes Apache can run in, but for now just know it's pre-fork by default, which I don't know the real stats, but over 90% of the Apache servers out there are running in pre-fork mode. So let's explore what pre-fork means, and we're going to also look at 2 other modes. That will be the next most popular, even though they're not all that popular. There's a lot more of other ones that we're not going to look at today. But we got pre-fork worker and events. Just quick explanation of each one. Pre-fork NPM uses, which is a multi-processing module, that's what NPM stands for, uses multiple child processes with 1 thread each. So each process that is spawned serves 1 request. It uses, when in this mode, it uses a module called mod.php to process the PHP. So you actually assigning the task of processing the code to the web server itself. Worker NPM, it has multiple child processes with multiple threads each. So I'm not really into a lot of hardware and what the different processing modes are, but if your operating system is thread safe, this actually gives you a lot of performance gains, but you can end up with some issues down the road. Honestly, I've never run into issues, so I think it's pretty safe to say you can use it. In this mode, actually the web server does not process the PHP, and it offloads it to another part of your stack, a different application. In this case, it's going to be PHP FPM. Then event does pretty much the same as worker does, but it also adds asynchronous processing. It's the newest thing. It's been introduced in 2.4. It also uses a third party like PHP FPM. One caveat is if you're using HTTPS, it will actually fall back to using worker mode. So you will get no asynchronous advantage at all. During this presentation, we're actually going to tweak all three of these, and then we're going to put them to the test as well. So let's start with the default, the LAMP stack with Apache 2.4 in pre-fork mode. So we said this is what we get by default when we do task cell. You end up with a fairly modern version of PHP, in this case 5.5.9. You're running Apache 2.4.7. And what I wanted to show you is that out of the box, you don't get a really performant configuration. There's a lot of different things you can actually tweak. But I wanted to really focus on the max request workers directive, which is the number of processes that will be started to service a request. By default, you get set up with 150. This is not a big deal until you get any actual traffic, because when you do, if you try to run 150 processes, your server will choke and die. So there's some simple math you can do to figure out what your max request workers needs to be. In this case, let's say we want to limit the amount of memory that Apache uses to 512 megabytes, which is about half of the available memory, thinking that you gotta run your database and your OS and everything else that's on the server. So keeping it to half sounds like a pretty, conservative measure. You run some, like in this case, htop or top, and it'll give you the average here. It's about 2.2% per process. This is about 22.5 megabytes. If you divide the 512 by 22.5, you get about 23 max request workers. So it's a very rule of thumb math. It's not scientific, but it's a little basis that you can use to, just have a starting point. From there, just monitor your server and know if you need to go up or down and what really works for you. And also keep in mind, this measurement was taken while the server was sitting idle. It's not getting any traffic. So I would definitely recommend, checking it out at different times of the day, checking during peak times, and seeing, what your real usage is. But for this experiment, let's just say we set it to 23. Like I was saying, if you had left it at default with 150, if you actually wanted to use all the processes, you'd be using about 3.3 gigs of RAM. Given this box has 1 gig, it would definitely start swapping. It'll get real slow, and it probably would crash. All right, let's look at LAMP stack in Apache 2.2 in pre-fork mode. I go with 2.2 because it's extremely popular still. I believe probably most servers that are using Apache are in the 2.2 version. It was the main version for many, many years. It ships by default on many systems, so I also wanted to bring this one as one of the setups to test. Because Ubuntu 14.04 will install 2.4 by default, I went ahead and actually compiled Apache and PHP by hand. And if you've never done it, it's a good experience just to know, and really appreciate how much your package manager, how much time it's saving you. It's a big pain to install both of those without any errors and actually get them running, but it's done, and it's fun to do it once. In this case, instead of max request workers, the directive is called max clients, but it's the exact same. And doing this, doing the math on this one, we see that it's about 13 megabyte usage. It's about 28 clients. That was the real math when I took the screenshot. 13 sorry. At 13 megabytes seems like really low, even though it was sitting idle. So instead of 28 max clients, I went ahead and halved that to 14, just based on experience. So again, just base the settings on your experience and what you're seeing in your monitoring and what's really working for you. I think 28 would have been just way too much for this case. Next one, we go back to Apache 2.4, this time on worker mode with PHP FPM. FPM is the fast CGI process manager. And what it does is, instead of using mod PHP and letting Apache handle your PHP, it passes it to FPM where it gets processed and the response is sent back to Apache for rendering. And we're using Worker, which has always been the main alternative to pre-fork, even though it's not all that popular. Installing it is really easy. Just look it up, but it's pretty much a couple of commands in the command line and you change from one mode to the other. Again, here we see we got the version 559, and now you can see that the server API is FPM fast CGI and no longer mod PHP. In this case, also, actually the memory consumption went down by a good bit. We got about 8 megabytes per process, again, sitting idle. Gives us about 64 max request workers. One thing to keep in mind, because it uses multiple processes with multiple threads each, there has to be certain concordance. So you can see, I don't know if you can actually read, at the bottom there's an error. When I try to set it to 64, it's letting me know that 64 is not a multiple of 25, which is the setting for threads per child. So it rounds the number down to 50 automatically. So just something to keep in mind. In this case, instead of leaving it at 64 and rounding down to 60, I set it to 75. All right, and now we move on to the LAMP stack with Apache 2.4, event, plus PHP FPM. The event NPM is based on the worker NPM. They're very similar. It adds asynchronous processing. And always remember, if using HTTPS, at least for now, it'll default to working exactly like worker, which is not a bad thing. Just know you're not getting any asynchronous processing. All right. Again, I'll just go real quick through the math. And again, the default is 150, which is probably still a little much. We do our little math. We ended up with about 4 megabytes. That gives us 128 workers, which is about 600 megabytes on the 150 default setting. It's pretty close to the 512 we wanted to use, but we're setting it up to 128, and again, this gets rounded down to 125. These multiples of 25. You could have also changed the threads per child setting, but I wanted to only mess with one setting for this talk. Next, we're gonna get away from Apache altogether. We're going with the LAMP stack. Any LAMP stack users here? The E being for Nginx, not an actual E. Cool. So this stack, no Apache, and we use Nginx instead. The configuration is known as LAMP, although it's not as well known, clearly. And that's Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. And Nginx is another open source web server. I think the Apache event mode, it's actually kind of trying to be a little bit more like Nginx. And it's built with performance in mind. I happen to run a couple servers with this, and in this case, we're going to leave it default, but it's a really cool server. It works very well, and we might be able to see that during the test. So here you can see your server software is now Nginx 146, so no longer Apache. And it also uses PHP FPM to process PHP. It does not have its own module for processing. All right, next up, we're going to look at the new HHVM. Anybody tried it out? HHVM is the hip hop virtual machine. It's what Facebook put together so they could run PHP really fast. They open sourced it, so all the code is available out there. And it has what's called a just-in-time compiler. Basically, for what I understand, it takes PHP code, compiles it to C++ bytecode, and that makes it a lot faster than regular PHP, supposedly. We'll see, during testing if we can get those results. All right. It's not a web server, so you still need to use either Apache or Nginx or something else. And it uses the HHVM fast CGI, which works pretty much like FPM, but it's its own thing. So you're offloading your PHP processing to the hip-hop virtual machine. For this presentation, I set up both HHVM with Apache 2.4 in event mode and HHVM with Nginx. A couple caveats when using is that it's not 100% compatible with all PHP code. That's a goal of the hip-hop team. They're trying to make it compatible with everything that's out there, but it's compatible with most of what we use. There's some popular ones like CodeIgniter, WordPress, Laravel. They're all listed there as 100% compatible, and they keep testing and putting out the results, so it's pretty safe to start using HHVM. Second gotcha is that it only runs on 64-bit operating systems. All right, if you try to do a PHP info on your hip-hop installation, they went very minimalistic. You don't get to see any settings, so that's what you get out of PHP info on a hip-hop box. It lets you know that it's working, so that's one advantage. All right, the last one that we're going to look at is Lighty. Anybody ever use Lighty? All right, it used to be popular a few years ago. I never actually tried it, but I wanted to take it out for a test. I thought this was a good opportunity. It's another web server. It also uses FPM, so it doesn't process PHP on its own. It had a following at some point. I think it was reaching like 1% of the server market. I think it's lower than that these days, but let's see what it's capable of doing. I think the claim to fame was that it was really lightweight. All right, so we're going to begin the battle of the stacks. The results do have some validity to them, but these are very basic tests done on minimum configuration servers. So don't base your next server decisions on this presentation. But I'm hoping that by doing this, I can give you a little bit of interest on going and looking what it is that you can do with your own servers to just get some more performance out of what you already have. The rules for the contest, I'm sure you can read, but I'll tell you anyways. So each stack gets paired against another one, and that was done in random order. They all get a vanilla installation of WordPress, and that's what we're testing against. Could have been anything else, but it just seems like a popular distribution, software to just take for a ride. Each stack is tested using Loader.io. It's a free tool anybody can use, so I definitely recommend it. And all the tests are also, I put URLs to each one of them. You can go and see a simulation of how it went, and I'll show you one in just a minute. The stack with better response time moves on to the next round. Each round is harder than the round before. And the winner of the third round is crowned the last stack standing. So it's a fairly simple setup. Again, 1 GB of RAM, Ubuntu 14.04, all hosted on DigitalOcean. And here I'm actually going to show you this, what the test looked like. Just let it run for a few seconds. So you see you have your clients and your average time. In that example, we're keeping the average time somewhere between 10 and 12.5 milliseconds, and that's the number of clients that's happening. We won't see any more tests, but you can get access to each one of the tests that I run. All right, here's how we decided the random order for how they're going to be competing. So it's 0 against 1, 1 against 2 against 3, 4 against 5, and so on. It came out to a pretty good bracket. You can see this is what it looks like. We're going to do 2.2 pre-fork against 2.4 worker, HHVM and Nginx against the newest Apache 2.4 event, Lighty against LAMP, 2.4 pre-fork, which is probably the newest, most, what's going to be this de facto standard moving forward for Apache servers, against the HHVM Apache 2.4. The first round is going to be 60 clients over 60 seconds. So let's see how well they did. First, we got one of the most common configurations in the wild, which is the LAMP Apache 2.2. With pre-fork, it's reliable to a point. It can be tuned for better performance, which we already did earlier with the max clients, and then on the 2.4 side, we did with the max request workers. Worker NPM has been the main alternative to pre-fork, but it's, like I said before, not extremely popular. Again, those URLs will show you the test, so let's see how they did. 2.2 pre-fork has a average response time of 163 milliseconds. 2.4 worker with FPM, 60 milliseconds. 2.4 is the winner. HHVM Nginx against LAMP Apache 2.4 FPM. HHVM is the new, it's hot. And Nginx has been a favorite of high-performance sysadmins for quite some time now. Event FPM and 2.4 are the latest developments in Apache, so I was particularly curious on how this one was going to turn out. Anybody have any guesses who is going to win this round? All right, and no surprises there. So 32 milliseconds for HHVM and Nginx, and Apache 2.4, 65 milliseconds. Excellent results for both of them, but only HHVM is going to move on. But definitely, if I'm getting 65 milliseconds out of my server, I'm pretty happy. Next one, we're going to do no Apache in this round. It's Leidy against LAMP. So there's no Apache, and they're both using FPM, so we're really measuring which web server is faster, at least for serving 60 requests over 60 seconds, right? This is a very basic test we're doing. And actually, I was surprised. Leidy did so well. 50 milliseconds against LAMP, 44 milliseconds. They're extremely close. I don't know if I had run this test 100 times, if we get the exact same result every time. I ran them once, so that's what you get. And without giving any spoilers, I actually, even though some setups didn't move to the next round, I did run all the tests against all the setups. And I gotta say that this matchup, Leidy actually does win one of the rounds on higher clients. But it lost the first one, and it's out of the competition. All right, and then we have LAMP Apache 2.4 pre-fork against HHVM Apache 2.4. I think, everybody can guess that HHVM is probably going to win. But something to keep in mind is that the Apache 2.4 pre-fork is going to be the standard for Apache. So most servers will be running these in the future. So it's good to see, the kind of performance you can get out of it. I never heard of anybody using HHVM with Apache. I've heard of people doing it with Nginx, but by all means, try it. Apache 2.4 has been getting good results. So pre-fork comes in at 82 milliseconds, HHVM at 30 milliseconds. So far, HHVM with Apache 2.4, if you've been following, has the highest or the lowest response time of all the tests. So a little bit of a surprise there. Let's look at now the round two. We have LAMP Apache 2.4 with worker and FPM against HHVM and Nginx. And we got LAMP against HHVM Apache 2.4. I thought it was kind of nice how it felt that we have Nginx and Apache against Nginx and Apache on both rounds. So we had some surprises. I don't know if anybody has a favorite thus far to win it all. Nobody's going to risk? No. HHVM and Nginx, is that kind of the consensus? Yeah? All right. Again, just to remind you, these are totally non-scientific tests. Do not base your next server decisions on this. But we're going to duplicate the number of clients. Now we're going to 120 clients over 60 seconds. And we'll see how they do. We got the Apache 2.4 worker with FPM against HHVM with Nginx. And result is LAMP comes in at 85 milliseconds, HHVM and Nginx 31 milliseconds. What is nice about this is, if you remember now, HHVM and Nginx with twice as many clients actually shaved off 1 millisecond. It had come in at 32 milliseconds in the previous test, so seems like you can give it a little more and it responds even better. The performance on both of these is impressive, but only one moves on. Now we have Classic LAMP, a favorite of the high-performance sysadmins for a long time, against the new with HHVM and Apache 2.4. It's a cool, second round, like we said before, Nginx Apache, Nginx Apache. One Nginx is already in the final. We'll see if it can dominate the field. And nope, still 60 milliseconds, really good performance for 120 requests over 60 seconds, but 29 milliseconds. Also shaved off 1 second of the previous test. So both the servers using HHVM definitely performing even better as you increase the number of clients. I think that's actually pretty impressive. And now we're going to go to the final. For the final, we're actually taking the client count to 480 clients over 60 seconds. That is 8 times more than the original test. So we have learned something at this point, which is the choosing to offload the processing of PHP off the web server actually gives you a huge improvement, and it doesn't cost you anything, right? You can do this for free and increase your performance a ton. Definitely seeing that HHVM seems to be a winner. I mean, it looks like it really adds a ton of performance to your server. Keep in mind, I actually looked at top while I was doing this. CPU usage does go up a ton, but it's so available that it doesn't really take a big hit on your server. But something to keep in mind while you're tuning this up. But definitely getting to the finals with both HHVM, I think it tells us something. So let's see who's going to win this. And anybody want to risk Nginx or Apache? Nginx, raise hands. Nice. And Apache, the other half? Sweet. All right. And we actually have Apache winning for 60 milliseconds against 76 milliseconds. Both super impressive. I mean, 180 requests per minute. It's pretty insane traffic. So, I think it's great. Response times are excellent for both. But look that it's about half as fast as it was in previous tests, right? They were both around 30 milliseconds for the previous test, and now they went to 76 and 60, respectively, which means the curve starts, to take a toll at a certain measure. That's when I would say, hey, you already configured this. If you still, need a little more, now would be a good time to, add a little more RAM, or, just being able to increase those max workers or something along those lines. But for now, I think you would handle everything with just your $10 server, and that's pretty exciting. Also, like I said before, I run this test on every configuration out there. On the default Apache 2.2 pre-fork, which is probably the most popular server out there, this test actually ended up with over 7 seconds response, and it avoided with over 53% error rate. So at some point it crashed. I mean, couldn't handle the request. It might have been that it choked the database. Something happened. But, with the same server, you could have just upgraded your Apache version for nothing, offloaded the processing away from mod PHP and into PHP FPM. That would take you about 30 minutes worth of work if you've never done it before, and your server would not have crashed. All right, so we have HHVM and Apache 2.4, champion of the Battle of the Stacks ATO edition. Anybody know who that is? I don't know if you can see him. Yeah, it's a pretty obscure reference if you're not born and raised in Argentina. So I apologize for that. It's Martin Palermo. It's a hero to me. But so I wanted to put a champion up there. But now I want to talk about a real champion, a true champion. And that is Takeru Kobayashi. Do you guys remember Takeru Kobayashi? Yeah? Okay. So Takeru became famous the world over on July 4th, 2001. He won the Nathan's Coney Island hot dog eating contest and broke the world record that same day for hot dog eating, all at the same time. He ate 50 hot dogs in 12 minutes. That was not in 2001, actually, but it was a good picture I found. The previous record had been 25 hot dogs, not 50. So he could have stopped at 26. He still would have broken the world record. But, I guess he wanted just to test how far he could take things. So in that spirit, we're going to take the champion to do a Kobayashi round, to see how far we can take it before it actually starts failing. Right? We know we can handle the 480 clients per minute just fine. Let's see what is that we can get out of this. So I played around with a few tests that you can, the final one, I ended up, you can see right there that address. I ended up with about 6 seconds response with a little over 2,100 requests per minute. I think that's pretty awesome. Still, you probably couldn't handle these longer than 60 seconds. It would, the error rate would start climbing, and eventually you would crash. But I think this is, again, for a 1 gigabyte RAM server. I've had a lot of clients say, I just want the biggest server on rack space, et cetera, et cetera. Just throw more gigabytes. We need more gigabytes. Like, no, you don't need anything. You just need to tune it right, and make the best out of what you do have. Of course, more RAM, it's always better. But if you can get this out of $10, I think it's worth really spending a little bit of time tuning up. All right, so key takeaways. A lot of options available. They don't cost you anything. Exhaust all your possibilities before you're going to spend money on bigger hosting. We know that a $10 a month server can withstand a pretty hefty load. Optimize for speed, but also reliability. Again, we can say there's no point in serving pages fast if you can't serve them at all. What works for someone else might not be what works for you, so beware of, blog posts out there that say how they increase, their performance by X factor. Your code is unique to you, and your situation, your traffic are unique to your project. So just keep that in mind when tuning up. Experiment. Combine, don't be afraid, just do it all over again, and eventually you will find the right configuration. I want to take a second to thank Chris Vidal. I don't know if you know him. He's just a guy, he writes a newsletter called Servers for Hackers. It's really good. He's got a lot of really good material. He just released a book called Servers for Hackers. And he's got case studies and a bundle and everything, and he gave me 3 bundles to give away for free. They're about $70 each. I couldn't think of a good way to give them away, so if you're interested in one of those, please come see me after the talk, and I'll give you a code to go download it for free. Just first come, first serve. And if you don't mind, if you can tweet him a thank you for his books and for all that he does to share his knowledge. And thank you all very much for coming. I hope it was fun for you too. If you want to get in touch, that's my email. That's me on Twitter, and the slides will be available to you pretty soon at speakerdeck.com/NicDev. Thanks. I'm sorry, anybody have any questions? Anything I can answer for you? Yeah.
Did you run the loader on the same box as the server?
No, it actually, so that's a great question. I don't know if everybody heard about whether I was writing the load test from the server that this was running. No, it's a third-party service provided by SendGrid for free. They actually run it from multiple locations all at once. For free, you can use up to 10,000 clients, which I did run, and it was stupid how quickly it broke everything. But yeah, it wasn't from my home, so the network conditions were as even as possible. The boxes making the test were as even as possible. It was all done with Loader.io. I definitely recommend them. Anyone else?
Do you have examples of your Apache and
I'd be super happy to share them. Honestly, Nginx, I mostly don't really tune up all that much. Just default has been working very well for what I'm hosting. I do have a pretty big installation that gets pretty good traffic on Apache .4 with FPM, and if you just send me an email, I'll be more than happy to just post a gist for you.
Obviously, HHVM is fast if you actually use it.
No, so, it's kind of new. I've done this talk before. It was mostly centered around Apache 2.2. I wanted to bring in new technologies and do last talk was really about what happens if I increase max clients, if I decrease max clients. I'm focusing on that. this time I wanted to really include 2.4 HHVM, and I brought in Lighty, as like a footnote of something that had been popular at one point. But I'm definitely considering using HHVM. I'm just a little scared that if something goes wrong, I'm not as familiar with it. If I'm hosting somebody's site, it's just not kind of fun to experiment too much with their stuff. But definitely worth looking at, I think.
Why do you think Apache won?
Honestly, I got no idea. I was surprised. I thought, I'm still an Nginx fan, and the results were really, really close. I think it would be a lot better to run both under load for longer periods. I don't know. I can say Apache is really faster just based on these. These are very, contrived tests that they don't have any real meaning, right? It's not sustained traffic. It's not, different paths or URLs. It's just hitting the homepage over and over and over. You can also, I did a lot of tests with static pages. They're all the servers pretty much, all the modern ones, not so much Apache 2.2, but all the modern ones, they're all around 20 milliseconds response. And you can go super high and it just never crashes. So, if you are using a caching layer where you just, cache your dynamic output and now it's just a single static file, it'll serve super, super fast with all of them. So I think Apache won because these circumstances were better for Apache. I'm not sure it's a better server at this point. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much. It's great.